Well, long time coming, but I'm here at Dundon. Jamie's going to give us Charles give us a tour, so we're going to check out some of the crazy projects they have going on here. But the OG Northwest Gathering, we're all going to go check it out. This is one of our pit stops of one of our many tours of the cool stuff in the Seattle area. There's the shop. These floors look insane. Love this. Engine out. Owlins.
We started Dundon Motorsports coming up 4 years ago. Charles and I got the wild hair to build some exhaust together. And then it kind of grew from there, and we said, well, shit, if we're going to build exhaust together, why don't we just open another shop? Because he was unhappy at the shop he was in. So we brought another partner in who's not here today. He's actually out at the track coaching. And we built this. So this is about 6,000 square feet. ECJ goes toiling away. He's 20-year Porsche gold level tech, and he pretty much is our service department. He's a one-man band, does all of it. Charles will come in and help with things. The engines that are sitting there on the ground, one of them is out of Griffin Ross's car, getting some coolant welds done, kind of normal GT3 maintenance stuff. And the other one sitting next to it is my 42R, which has been a 5-year laborer of consternation and frustration, trying to do some cutting-edge crap, applying Formula 1 tech to a Metzger engine that's going in that orange one we're doing for. Shipping and receiving, stuff that gets done goes on the rack, gets QC'd before it goes out. Try and act like a big company, not just a bunch of hooligans that can weld. Watch your step. Fab shop. So this is our dirty area. This is where metal gets ground. The doors try to stay closed, or at least we keep air going in and exhaust going out, so that metal particles that are being generated in there don't end up out here where we're working on engines, or that they go Phil, Justin, and Paul. And Paul was an aerospace welder. Phil worked on an aircraft carrier for 40 years, so he's phenomenal. He's like, anything we don't know how to do or kind of aren't sure how to fix it, Phil's like, yeah, I've done that. What the hell? That nuclear reactor, I can fix that. So, fantastic. In the last 2 months, we have seen a bit of a hockey stick ramp. There's a lot of .2 RSs that have been hitting the ground. And thanks to the efforts of some of our very early customers that do a better job of marketing our products than we do, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of features. Typically what sells an exhaust immediately is how fast. Almost always. And then they get in the car and they go, holy shit, this thing's got a whole truckload of horsepower. And this is Mike, he's one of our engineers. Mike, say hi.
Hello, how's it going, everyone?
This is the Obsessed Garage Tour. This is our incredibly dirty, overrun engine room. A lot of projects going on at the same time right now. This is 4.5 liter GT4 parts that are, honestly, we need 87 hours in a day to finish all the projects. So that's getting done. This is the transmission for the pumpkin. They've got a full cup re-gear for 9,500 RPM redline, assortment of 3D printed parts. Honestly, Charles is beside himself how dirty it is. He's like, seriously, Matt's going to come in and look at this? I'm never going to hear the end of it. So,
yeah, why doesn't he just put stuff away?
You see how much away room there is, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, he's got drawers, and there's nothing in the drawers. It's all on the top.
That's probably.
I'll give him a hard time.
Give him a hard time for sure. So some of the things that we've been doing, concentrating on lately is when you're trying to generate power. And I told you I'd get back to some of the questions. When you're trying to generate power in a naturally aspirated engine, essentially you're just trying to improve the amount of air it can ingest and gases it can expel per cycle. And typically that's about the pressure ratios between the intake side, and the exhaust side. So these things called back pressure and flow, yeah, that's kind of part of the issue. That isn't the entirety of it. And that's where a lot of exhaust manufacturers will tell you, oh, we lowered your back pressure, so you're gonna make more power. Just take the cats off, you'll make more power. It's more complicated than that. How many of you have seen the waveform slow motion picture of a bullet leaving the gun? You guys all have that picture in your head, the little cone that forms, pressure wave? That pressure wave forms every time your exhaust valve opens in your engine. So you have one of those pressure waves going. The way pressure waves work is they like to reflect and form and do kinds of crazy crap. So when a pressure wave is in a tube and it hits an expansion, it will reflect off of that expansion. When it reflects off the expansion, if you can think of the pressure wave had a shape, it's going to invert when it comes back. So it goes from being a pressure wave to, in essence, a negative pressure wave in engineering parlance, or a vacuum wave. So vacuum wave now heads back to the head, and the length of the header, the diameter of the header, and where and how much expansion we can put on the collector will dictate when that wave gets back to the head. Now, that wave alone getting back to the head will help pull more gases out of the cylinder. Pulling more gases out of the cylinder is important because how many of you know what an EGR valve is? Generally know what I'm talking about? Exhaust gas recirculation. It's an emission requirement. So to reduce nitrous oxide levels, you have to burn the exhaust a number of times in the cylinder to be able to take it from NO2 to NO3, NO4, NO5, to keep adding oxygen molecules to it. So we don't have to worry about that. We don't worry about EGR, and that's one of the ways that we're able to get more power, is by getting all of the excess gas that's being held in the cylinder on purpose out. So does that add a little bit of nitrous oxide to the universe? Yeah, probably. Is that going to negatively affect things for guys that drive their car once a week and then either don't commute, like us, or have other cars to commute in, or these kinds of things? Yeah, probably not. And it still has cats and all this stuff, and all that's all fine, blah, 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 blah. But that's how, for example, on the 991.1 GT3, we got 40 wheel horsepower. It's not voodoo, it's just science.
Is that what you call scavenging?
That's part of it, yeah. So that is scavenging. So getting that pressure wave to go back and turn into a vacuum wave, and the timing of it, because ideally, you want some of that vacuum wave to exist during just the blowdown phase, when the exhaust is trying to get out so that it can really get sucked out. And then you also want it to happen when the intake valve and the exhaust valve are both open during overlap, because then you actually can put a stronger vacuum in the cylinder and pull more air in from the intake. So in essence, you're kind of vacuum supercharging it, if you can think of it that way. Now we get to these things. This is our intake manifold that, toss it around, grab it.
3D printed?
3D printed with a very advanced 3D printing. Most 3D prints are not watertight or functional.
Yeah.
Right. They're not watertight, so you can't use them for intake parts.
Is that SLA or
Nope.
is that extrusion?
Neither. That's what I said. It's a very advanced.
This is cool.
Our engineers have fun with that kind of crap. They're like, hey, I can print our logo on it too. I'm going to put it everywhere.
Cut that part out.
Yeah, don't let everybody know that, because I'd rather not empower my competition to go, oh, that's who I call how to do this. Fantastic. And off they go.
Yeah.
Because it took us about 9 months of trial and error and breaking crap and trying to figure out where we could find the right thing effectively. The only thing that's interesting about that part is, or that's different than the stock part, is the inlet size. One of the things we found on the 991.2 GT3 RS, the big bad mofo that makes a whole lot of power out of the box, Porsche didn't change the air filter box since 2011. It's still the Carrera S air filter box. They didn't change the throttle since 2006 because Bosch doesn't make anything bigger than an 82mm throttle body. So when you start getting exhaust gases out, then you have to the pressure ratio is what's going to fill the cylinder. So if we see that on the dyno we're not getting a huge benefit from just the exhaust, because we know that the vacuum wave is there, we've done all the math to be able to get that, you know, to be a known quantity, then you can quickly get back to, there's another restriction. Why isn't the pressure ratio where it needs to be? And typically that's because the intake side becomes restricted. And that's why we opened up the throttle body. We also increased the filter area for the RS air filter by about 400%, because PV equals nRT, there is a speed component to airflow. If you're making it go fast through a filter, it loses more pressure. Naturally aspirated engines work on pressure ratios. So the more pressure on the intake side, meaning atmospheric pressure, the more power that is going to get into the engine, the more flow that you're going to get into the cylinder, the more power you're going to be able to produce. So that's the basics. Things get more complicated from there, because we can actually use what's called resonance tuning, the same idea on the exhaust side, on the intake side. And I'll walk over there to my 42R engine and show you guys that so Mike can get back to work. And then we decided to back the application and go back and wash, rinse, repeat. Right? So here it is. So this one is SLA. This is one of the early ones. It's SLA and epoxy coated on the inside so that it's airtight. Standing behind us, Charles is here finally. Okay, this is the Dundon. Where's your hat?
I forgot it all.
Come on. So this is Charles. He's actually the magic wizard behind all of this. I'm going to tell you a little story about Charles. He's going to get embarrassed by this, but that's okay. I'm a chemie by training. I've been a process engineer in semiconductors for 20 years. Meet this cat. He's like, yeah, I can build a set of headers for your 997. It'll probably make 25, 30 wheel horsepower. I'm like, what? You're on crack. There's no way a set of headers makes that much. He goes, no, really. Because I'm going to work with resonance tuning. I'm going to work with, you know, pressure wave theory. I'm going to work with pulse gas theory, and I've done all the math to make this happen. I was like, okay, hold up. What do you do for a living? Yeah, I went to tech school when I was 18, and I went to Porsche tech school thereafter, top of my class. I think I'm the only one that had 100% on all the tests. I was like, wait. But you're not an engineer. No. But you're doing differential equations to figure out the math for all of this crap. Yeah, I had to teach myself that too. Okay, what the are you kidding? Nobody teaches themselves differential equations to make cars go faster. This cat did, and I was like, all right, he's special. I'm gonna invest way more money than I thought I was going to make it work, so that we can get some stuff out in the market that really truly does what it is supposed to. So that was the why I'm standing here and working for free 4 years later. I don't get paid. This is a labor of love. I do all the sales calls, all the social media, all this stuff. I don't get paid yet. Hopefully at some point I do, but I need to talk to this guy about that, because I'm obviously doing something wrong. So anyway, back to this. This is the stock part.
So this is a 997.1 Metzger.
This is a 997.1 Metzger.
Is there a difference between the .1 and .2 engine?
Engine, not so much.
It's the
capacity's a little different. The intake manifold's got a little bit bigger. They mess a little bit.
But the bottom end is the same.
Bottom end's all essentially the same. Yeah. So this is the stock part.
This is the plenum, right?
This is the plenum. So this is the plenum half. You can see between this part and this part.
So this
there
connects.
Is a remarkable difference.
This connects the throttle body to the intake manifold.
That's right. So this connects the head, so the ports, where the valves are, to the center plenum. So this would be called the intake runners. This is the common plenum. So this is the center. So this is where we have valves or don't have valves, and we mess with waves bouncing back and forth or not bouncing back and forth and this kind of crap. So again, we're back to pressure waves. In an intake track, when the air comes in, while the intake valve's open, it's going to flow in. As soon as the intake valve closes, a pressure wave is going to be formed off the closing because air has mass, and it's going to bounce back off of that. So a pressure wave is going to bounce back into the intake runner. How long this runner is, how many bounces we let that pressure wave go back and forth will dictate what kind of power we can produce. The shorter the runner, the less number of times it will bounce, potentially. So it gets complicated because you have to understand the cam timing. You have to understand the time area units of the mass flow of the air that's going into the engine. I'm getting most of this about 80% right, and he's going to correct me at some point, but he hasn't jumped in yet, which means I'm doing okay.
Am I supposed to?
If you want to, or you can just make me look like a fool on Obsessed Garage, and that's fine. Because we don't want to educate we want to educate our customers. We do not want to educate our competitors, right? Bottom line is, if you can manipulate the intake pressure waves appropriately, there's upwards of an 8 to 12% increase in power that you can get, depending on how many times the pressure wave will bounce back and forth in the runner before it goes in. Ideally, the fewer number of times that it bounces back, the less frictional effects, the more mass of air you're going to carry with that pressure wave to get it into the cylinder. So, for example, the one behind us, you can see it also has this intake on it. That is a stock 3.8 liter. That car stock makes about 380 wheel horsepower with headers and the intake on it. No cams, not any kind of fancy tuning. It's up 60 wheel horsepower. Those are the parts that we are concentrating on now. Those are the parts that we're going to bring to the 991 market. We already built some prototypes for the 991 GT3, and they were spectacular up to about 6,000 RPM, and then they lost like 120 wheel horsepower. Because, as I said, it gets complicated. Because if this runner is working really effectively and efficiently, and in essence supercharging, there's only a certain amount of mass in the middle of air, and only a certain amount that it can ingest in one time period. So in essence, we have to build a bigger capacitor to use an electrical parlance. We have to give this a bigger battery of air for all these runners to draw from. Otherwise, the engine will just starve as the RPMs go up. And that meant we had to do, holy crap, full redesign, gotta find a way to put 12 pounds of crap in a 6-pound bag, because it's not like, we can just go up and make a hood scoop or some crazy thing like on a front engine car. So
the prototype runners on the .1 GT3 non-RS makes it have almost .2 RS power with just the runner's full power.
Yeah, torque went up equivalent. I mean, it jumped almost 40
It was about a 12-15% increase in power everywhere.
So I have to pull the engine to put that on?
You would have to, well,
drop the engine?
This car, yes.
This car, yeah.
Because we didn't want to redesign it. 991, the other parts that are available for your car right now, no.
Yeah.
You just have to lower it down a little bit. You don't have to drop it.
So I'd still need an engine lift or engine...
You need to put it on a jack. Lower it down before you lift all the car the whole way up, because our instructions have it so you flip the subframe, you put some wood in there, and then it's supported.
Oh,
you don't need an engine jack.
Yeah.
Then you move it.
I'm going to hire someone to do that then.
Yeah. Or you take it to Titan and they do it for you.
That's what I'm planning on doing.
Because you got more valuable things to do with your time sometimes.
So this is another one that I talked about this off camera, but header design, there's a common misconception that the headers didn't do anything, and so for years and years, and this is when we met, when I had talked to you on the phone, I just didn't believe, I was new to Porsche, I just didn't believe that we take a 997 center bypass and bolt it on a 991 and that's all we can get.
Right.
I just believed that there was, I believed that there was something better. That somebody had to put a car on a dyno and do some work.
Right.
And nobody wanted to do that.
Which is really frustrating, because that's how work gets done.
And so,
design a thing and not test it.
So to me, what you're saying, what I'm hearing is like that plenum, like somebody tried to make like a carbon fiber box and just stuck it on there. I'm like, that didn't make any power, lost power. So that's a worthless modification.
Pretty much. Yeah. And honestly, I would say 90% of the guys that have a shop that build parts can weld shiny pipes together. They have no idea why they would want to weld shiny pipes together. Yeah,
and or you just weld them together and then see what happens. Put on a dyno.
Right.
All right,
that's good enough. We got 15 horsepower. We got 20 horsepower. Ship it. Let's make money. Let's make it out of crap, and let's have somebody in China make it.
And I just don't, and I don't believe that. I mean, this is why I always pay up for engineering.
And I appreciate it.
You know, like Dynon gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
But Dynon does this stuff for BMW.
That's right.
You know, they hire
They're
engineers.
actually trying to meet OEM requirements. They're keeping the boundary conditions way tighter than we are.
Right.
You know, to meet factory warranty requirements.
Carb requirements, yeah.
Is that why Porsche doesn't do it from the beginning? It's because
There's a lot of
OEM requirements.
There's a lot of boundary conditions when you're an OEM.
There's OEM. The main one's OEM is it has to pass emissions and it has to be able to make money.
Yeah.
So if they're not going to spend 10 grand per car extra to get another 20 horsepower out of it, and they're going to make 30,000 cars, so that's $10,000 times $30,000.
Yeah.
Now we're talking millions of dollars. That's
Right.
it's just
They're
money
just not
that's not
gonna do
going
it.
in your pocket.
I mean,
So-
and seeing enough generations of these and seeing how they always increment the power a little bit.
They're holding
it's
it back,
amazing
yeah.
How they always can find a little bit more in the next generation.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means that the previous generation was a little handicapped. And honestly, that makes our jobs really easy when they do
Yeah.
that. Like the .2 RS, it was obvious it was intake restricted the very first time we ran it, because we're watching our exhaust trace the torque curve in a lot of areas. We're like, whoa, 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 whoa. That shouldn't be happening. We know that there's a suction wave because it worked on exactly the same kind of engine, exactly the same capacity of engine.
And nobody's, you know, there's an audience that believes that, you know, Porsche engineers are infallible, that we can never improve upon. It's not that they don't know how to do it.
Exactly.
They have
boundary
parameters.
conditions,
Right.
They have other requirements that they're designing around.
So
So we
it-
would never once in a million years say we're the only ones that can do this.
It's that,
That's
and
ridiculous.
they don't need to.
Right.
They need to make a car better than the previous one, just enough to make somebody go out and buy the next car.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would never sell another car. And they can make power. I mean, F1 cars exist, so
Yeah.
that's.
I mean,
common knowledge
MotoGP
almost.
is 200 horsepower per liter. You guys can do the math to figure out where a Porsche is. Stock. Everybody goes, oh, a 458 is the highest, you know, displacement or highest specific displacement horsepower, yada, yada, yada. Actually, a 991.1 3.8 liter GT3 with our headers on it is the highest.
Well,
Now this one
GT3
is.
RS,
It's-
4 liter, a
Yeah.
.2 is, well, we're 147 horsepower per
147,
liter, I think,
yeah.
with all of our parts on it.
So that's, my car right now is at 496 wheel horsepower. An equivalent, and that's peak. Some of the areas where we're carrying, because let's talk dynos for a second. Everybody wants to look at dyno numbers, everyone wants to talk dynos, everyone wants to see the numbers. Dynos are a scientific tool. Don't believe marketing from a dyno, because you can make it say anything you want. If you know what you're doing with a dyno, you're like, there's a dyno in California. It's very popular, has a wind tunnel. Lots of numbers coming off of it. That car stock on that dyno is reported to make 440 wheel horsepower. I had to talk to the customer and said, okay, your car on that dyno makes 440 wheel horsepower. A 991.1 RS stock on our dyno makes 430 wheel horsepower. I want you to go line up next to a 991.1 RS and go run it. And let me know how badly he spanks your ass. Because it won't even be close. So that dyno says a number. That's great. That number is not in context.
It's relative.
It's always relative, and even then it can be wrong.
Yeah.
Because
Well, you could take that fan, stick it in the intake, and juice it 25 horsepower. We did that on the Titan dyno before.
right, or you can make the car be less than 68 degrees Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
or more than 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
Dump
and it
some
will
ice and-
lose
yeah.
30 wheel horsepower when it's above it, because of how Porsche programmed it.
Yeah.
On a DI engine, there are emissions requirements that they can't add fuel as intake air temps go up. So they limit torque. The number, and we kind of stumbled on it. We didn't plan this.
So that's what you're talking about when you say torque limiter.
That's right.
It's their, will they pull timing or pull fuel?
do a number of
It'll
things.
it'll pull timing, adjust camshaft timing, fuel to a point, but
And
it'll
in the
it'll
end,
limit.
if it still can't get it with those, it'll close throttle.
Yeah.
And that's where
trying to make
that's where ECU tuning comes in.
That's where ECU tuning helps, yeah.
Yeah.
We can start to take out some of those things that are intrusive for what we're trying to get done.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how to say this another way. You gotta vet the people that you're getting dyno data from the same way that you would vet the materials that you're putting on your car. The same way that there are trustworthy people in the world, and there are people that are going to lie to you to get your money.
Well, nobody believes you. Nobody believes me. I took a freaking car. I didn't know you guys from anybody.
Right.
I took my car to a random dyno. I stuck it on there. I have no axe. I paid for the darn exhaust.
Right.
I had no axe to grind.
I have never paid Matt a dime.
Right.
For
And I'm like,
anything.
well, that was 55 horsepower. So, yeah, with headers.
Yeah.
On a .1 GT3.
There was, no, that's a lie. You guys are full of crap.
I'm
That's
like,
impossible. Okay.
It was hotter when I did the second dyno than the first dyno.
That's impossible. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Well,
I'm glad you think so.
then I just
That's
pulled.
why we exist.
Then I pulled on a a .1 RS.
Right.
Like walked away from them.
He put the crack pipe, which you guys, I don't know if you've seen the videos of our crack pipe. We know what we're talking about. We have one over there. We'll show it to you. It's nuts. This was designed specifically for a race car customer that has a Cup MR that is trying to go win races. He's like, I want it louder and lighter than your loud muffler. Okay, Charles is like, here, whip, 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 whip. This is what we do to actually make a center delete that makes power. And I'll show it to you, and you guys will kind of understand. It has some cones in it, has some reflective areas, it has a really big, beefy X-pipe. All the things that guys that weld pipes together flat don't get. They just don't get. We chose to concentrate on the GT car market because it's a harder problem to solve, and everybody else is just kind of tripping over themselves. It's why we don't make a lot of turbo parts. Turbos are the same thing, they're pressure ratios. The science is no different in how you make them build power. The Porsche turbo market is littered with really loud talking, YouTube channel having marketing behemoths that we would do a bunch of work and just get drowned out. So that's fine. We're getting there. People start to know what we're about, and we just kind of quietly do our thing.
For a while, people were arguing with me about back pressure and valves. Because my argument was that the only thing the valves do is make it quieter.
Yeah. The valves are programmed to open and close in areas of the power curve where the car needs to have less pressure drop in the system to maintain flow. That's why they will close and open and
for
kill
sound.
drum. Right.
And
Yeah.
sound rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only reason those valves exist, is to kill drum.
Back to Dave's question
Yeah.
about why doesn't OEM do this, and you said a whole bunch of reasons, part of which has to do with incremental improvement, cost savings, things like that.
Yep.
Do you guys focus primarily on the intake and the exhaust? Does that kind of assume that everything that's in the combustion chain is up to the task, as opposed to there's some component in the combustion train that is at a kind of limiting performance margin, temperature, structural wise, so they purposely dial things back on the inlet?
I'll let him
all of that's
So
taken
essentially
into
you're saying-
consideration.
Let me paraphrase the question so that we answer it right. The amount of power that we're adding to the engine, are we going to break something in it because it's not up to the task? Is that essentially it? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Most of, like on a say a stock engine, like this one here, or say this 3.8 RS here, that's what 99% of everybody has, and that's what they're going to put the parts on. So everything we have is designed around that. The great part about, I'll say, Porsche versus every other car manufacturer is all of their design, development, and engineering is based around essentially you could take your car and do an endurance race with it from straight off the factory floor. You could probably, that car probably might last 24 hours with a ball with brakes and
I
tires.
think somebody's done that.
I think that somebody's always done it every year
I think
since.
they did it .2 4.0 RS
Yeah.
in the Nürburgring.
So the cars has that much engineering and development that we don't need to continue on with. However, we do need to make sure of a few things, and we have found that on GT4, that with all of our other power adding options to it, if you run the stock exhaust on the car, it will actually overheat on track, and you could actually grenade the engine.
Right.
Just from the stock, the exhaust is yes, it's restricted. It makes a couple horsepower removing it, but from a thermal management standpoint, so much heat from the engine has to go. Heat goes, push the piston down, it goes up through the engine case into the cooling, and then out the exhaust. So when you can't get it out the exhaust, it has to go into the coolant system. If the coolant system can't remove it, it just stays in the engine and heat soaks. Eventually it goes to the combustion chamber, it'll detonate, component could fail. And we've seen that a lot where we can't get 2-3 runs on a dyno in a row before it's 230, 250 temps.
Wow. And
just changing the
GT4
exhaust on the car, it won't even hit 210 after like 6 to 8 pulls.
Yeah.
So that's an external component. I would say at least all GT cars and 911. Boxer is a little different. The main engine components are over-engineered where we don't have to worry about that. We still look at it. But then the rest of our parts are made to work in conjunction with stock / OEM design criteria and how they built it. Like I would, if we went to put bigger cams in this engine, I might change the intake runner design. I might change the header settings, for example. Based on the amount of power it's making. Yeah, for that setup, for both performance, but most of this won't affect longevity at all.
This is a 1 of 1 Club Blau BTS. Yeah, so this is the color that was offered as an anniversary color. Anthony's in here finding horsepower in this car. So the same things that we've done with all of our other stuff. And the reason why this one's a little different is because, and I'll show you here, this part, Porsche, and this was some of the clues that we had. Probably, everybody else is probably wondering where the hell we are. It's different.
Yeah.
Why is it different?
All the other ones are flat.
Right.
So there's more volume?
This has cone filters.
Yeah, yeah.
It has more volume. Why did Porsche make the airbox on the Touring different when the other airbox actually fits easier?
Is it because there's not as much airflow from the top?
There's not as much ram air, so they had to keep that differential pressure and find a way to reduce the pressure through the airbox so that this car makes as much power.
Okay, so even with this airbox, it makes it about the same.
It's in the ballpark of a stock GT3.
Yeah.
So like a GT3 manual or a non-touring GT3. They're in the same ballpark.
I didn't know that.
So when we saw this, we were like, oh, so Porsche knows what's going on.
Interesting.
They did this. This wasn't by accident that they spent all this money to design a new part for this option package on a GT3.
Yeah.
So it was a clue. And then we kind of kept going with the clue and figured, oh,